Hello, and welcome to today's seminar hosted by the Ohio Village Muffins and Diamonds Vintage Baseball Program. Our topic today is on the history of women in baseball, and we have two excellent guest speakers. So our agenda for today's session will include a presentation by Leslie Heaphy on the history of women in baseball, and that will be followed by a question and answer session with Dr. Heaphy. And then we'll take a short 5-minute break before we transition into the second half of our seminar, where Brandy Frias from the Ohio Village Diamonds will talk about the history of the Diamonds program and her experience playing with that program. And that will be followed by a Q&A with Brandy, and then our session will come to an end. So this session will be recorded so that it can be archived on the internet later for future viewing. So you probably have gotten a little consent box that pops up on your screen. That's just Zoom's policy of requesting consent for any session that's recorded. Okay, and Jim Kimnack is going to present our first speaker for today, Leslie Heaphy.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce our first presenter of the day, Leslie Heaphy. Leslie is currently an associate professor of history at Kent State University and publishes in the area of the Negro Leagues and women's baseball. She has been the vice president of SABR, Society of American Baseball Research, since 2016. And she has been the chair of the Women in Baseball Committee of SABR since 1995. In March of this year, Leslie did a presentation on the history of women in baseball at the 2020 VBBA virtual conference, and now she's here to present for us. So Leslie, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I appreciate everybody taking the time on what's turned out to be a very nice looking Saturday morning. And yes, I'm sure we'd all rather be outside rather than sitting here listening, but I do appreciate. And so I'm going to attempt to hopefully successfully share my screen here. So you're going to be able to tell me if I do this correctly. Let's see if this works. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. It's a very weird thing that because when you're you don't get to see what everybody else is seeing either. So you're not always 100% sure it's working. So there's a lot that you can talk about when you talk about women in baseball, way more than most people think. And so, as I had done at the Vintage Baseball, was asked to look at 19th century women, which obviously fits with what your mission and activities are. So that's what I'm going to do again this morning. But if I don't know if anybody else saw my presentation, which for the other in March, the PowerPoint is entirely different and the presentation is slightly different, is pretty different as well, because I don't like to recycle the same old thing all the time. So rest assured, if you saw it before, it's going to be a little different. So the key thing that I like to first emphasize when we're talking about the history of women's participation in baseball, particularly in the 19th century, is there's much more than people realize. Hence the idea, let's fill up the gaps, let's show what's out there, and recognize that it's a much larger picture than most people realize. And for those who might be interested in learning more beyond what I talk about today, one of the best places that you can look at this particular issue is with, there we go, a book done by Deb Shattuck called Bloomer Girls. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Shattuck makes the very, very strong argument in her book that the participation of women in baseball today that we're seeing with the national teams and those kind of things is not new, the way it's being portrayed, but actually a return, because in the 19th century and earlier, women have participated in baseball, particularly as players, which is all I'm going to focus on today. From the earliest beginnings, it was not just a game played by men. And so that's, I think, a very accurate message. In another article she wrote, she actually identified 60 teams playing in just New York State alone between the late 1850s and the turn of the century. Women's teams of all different kinds and varieties, and we'll talk about that particular issue here momentarily. Okay. Here's a good example of one of those newspaper articles that talked about a team in Peterborough in the 1860s. And it illustrates a variety of the issues related to looking and understanding women's baseball in the 19th century and even into the 20th century. Couple things that you have to think about when we talk about this subject. You got to remember it's the 19th century. We are talking about a society that didn't think women should be doing anything strenuous, right? That thought women, hey, they wore corsets. They gave them fainting counters. Not because they couldn't do anything, but because of the corsets that didn't let them breathe, right? But, I mean, this was a society that believed that if women overexerted themselves, they would cause physical damage and mental damage, right? And so this is a pursuit like baseball is certainly up against those attitudes, but it's also up against the attitude that developed that baseball was a manly sport, right? That this was America's national pastime, and women just didn't do this kind of thing. And so when you look at this picture, you can see and compare it to the photograph on the cover of Deb Shattuck's book. The photograph on Shattuck's book is the much more common uniform. It's the regular everyday dress. And of course, reporters took great pleasure in talking much more about attire than they did play, talking about them tripping over their skirts and all of those kinds of things, talking about the color, the lack thereof. And then the newspaper article shows the women in a much more entertainment fashion, showing off their bloomers, right? Which is just not something proper women did. And that's the other attitude that dominated. What you get are sort of two views of women's baseball: an attempt to take it very seriously and to actually be recognized for playing, and the other much more common, which was to insult or to promote it as entertainment, burlesque, those kinds of ideas. And trying to separate out those two pieces when you're doing the research is really hard, for a couple reasons. Newspaper articles are not that big to begin with, and when they were, you'd often get maybe a paragraph, if you were lucky, of 2 or 3 lines talking about a game. And then, of course, you can't track down the history of these players because they're women after all, and they changed their names when they got married, all of those kinds of wonderful things. And newspapers had a tendency to just refer to them as Miss Ella and Miss Sue instead of their full names. And so you can't really track down somebody that way. But this particular photograph was also had a piece that went with it that said, the young women of Peterborough, New York, jealous of the popular sports, a more masculine portion of mankind, have organized a baseball club, already arrived at a credible degree of proficiency in play, members belonging to it from which a playing 9 has been chosen. A pretty straightforward account. So this is kind of that, okay, they're there. We don't know anything about the young lady who is indicated as their captain. Miller, unfortunately, is a pretty common name, so it's not an easy one to track down. But this is the kind, and this is, as I said, late 1860s kind of thing that was a pretty straightforward account of women playing. The most common thing we see in the early beginnings of women's baseball are college teams. And this is a picture a lot of people recognize from Vassar, the Vassar Resolutes, which was one of many teams at Vassar. College teams for women tended to be one of two kinds. They tended to be what we call intracollegiate, where they were like the first 2 teams at Vassar were the Laurels and the Abenakisses. They were the equivalent of, like today, if you were a freshman, were playing the sophomores, or the juniors were playing. So intra, within the school itself. And then the Vassar Resolutes played Smith College and other women's colleges around as those teams started to develop. And this was a much more serious idea. And much of our account of the Vassar Resolutes and the Vassar history comes of a letter written by Annie Glidden back to her brother, talking about what was happening at the school in 1866. And you notice she talks about they have a floral society, boat clubs, and baseball. And she says, I belong to the baseball club, and that we're going to play a club match with another team. The bit in parentheses about identifying them as a local prep school, that was added later. That's not part of the original. But playing, that was also, so here in 1866, they're not just playing against other women's colleges, they're starting to play against local teams. And it was very typical to play against what would have been considered a high school team. And that tells you something about how they saw the level of play and the level of expertise, et cetera, that was there. A way to get around some of the attitudes of the time. One of her teammates, Sophie Foster, said, "The public, so far as it knew of our playing, was shocked. But in our retired grounds, protected from observation by sheltering trees, we continued to play in spite of a censorious public." One of the ways that they got to play, and you can think about this, was literally if they could not be seen. So Vassar has an account of them playing behind the buildings so that nobody from the community and things actually knew what they were doing. And that was acceptable. So then you weren't challenging the norms of the day. Smith College has an account where they talk about as long as nothing got broken. And then a window got broken and the team got shut down. So it wasn't about breaking an arm or a leg, it was property. So any reason that they could find to shut these kinds of things down, they did. So here you have the examples of college teams, and these will continue. We also know that in 1875, we have the first account of a professional club playing in September in Springfield, Illinois. And the accounts in the newspapers are really interesting, and I want to read a couple of the snippets from the these are from September of 1875. And what you have are women's baseball teams outside college early on were either called the Reds and the Blues or the Blondes and the Brunettes. The Reds and the Blues usually because of the color of the belt that they wore around their dresses. And then the blonde and brunette didn't necessarily mean anything about your hair color. It was just a way. So the team in Springfield were the Blondes and the Brunettes. And the game is accounted for in 3 different accounts that I've found. And here's one of the problems. So one of them says that the Blondes won 42-38. Another one says that they won 41-21, same game. And the other one says 42-33. And it actually has a box score. And when you add up the box score, it doesn't match what the article says. So there's part of your problem. But here's the interesting piece. It says only 6 innings were played, and they occupied the full time. The players conducted themselves like regular ball players, as much so as females can. That is typical of the kind of coverage. Talking about the other article gives a little bit more detail on the kind of play we would be talking about, because they said it was included to include special bats and balls for the game they play, a special field to play on, inasmuch as the ball is lighter, the ball smaller, the bat smaller, and the field is reduced in size. Still located on a diamond-shaped field, the sides which are but 50 instead of 90 feet. So that's one of the few accounts that actually talks about what the field actually may have looked like. And I think that's an important thing to, we would love to find more of those kinds of discussions. Here's really the big problem though, and this particular photograph illustrates it. You'll notice the gentleman in the back. In this particular instance, he's identified as Sylvester Wilson. He probably is identified in newspapers by at least 5 or 6 or more different names. His actual given name was Christian Wilson. He had to change his name all the time because he was usually running away from the law. Arrested a whole bunch of times for exploiting the women that he promoted for these teams. He got arrested for inappropriate behavior with young women. So this is where the burlesque, less savory side of women's baseball, and this is what newspapers tended to pick up on. And he is not alone, but he is the most notorious. He also tended to take them to a city to play a game, and then he'd abscond with all the money and leave them there with no money. And the women that are then left at the mercy of the communities. So this is where a lot of the idea came from, that respectable women would not participate in these games. Why would your family let you do this? He's one of the reasons certainly responsible. One newspaper article actually referred to him as an abductor of girls on baseball pretexts. And so there's sort of the beginning of the more common side of seeing this as a burlesque. Here's a broadside from 1879, and you notice at the very top it says, "A novelty indeed." And sure, it was a novelty. And that's actually a fairly benign kind of approach, talking about the red stockings and the blue stockings. So again, here, how do you find a team when the Philadelphia team and the Pittsburgh team and the New York team are all just referred to as the Blues? But these were the common kinds of things that you would have seen advertising a game. You'll also notice that they talk about in here and others that they're going to start to mention for the championship of the United States. There were no championships. anybody could declare themselves a champion for promotional purposes for any reason at all. So that doesn't really actually mean anything when you see those kind of things for this type of approach. Another example of the kind of promotional piece, here's a broadside from a late 19th century vaudeville show. And there's lots we can talk about with this picture, but I just show it to you. Who would doubt that I'm a man, right? Wearing the bloomers by the late 1890s. This is when the bloomer teams start. And they will continue through, obviously, into the 1920s. This is indicative of the sort of thing that continued to promote the vaudevillian aspect of women's baseball. And so you very much see that here. Okay. Another example, this is from Trenton in New Jersey. So you can begin to see the kinds of play all over the place, talking about them playing a game between the blondes and the brunettes. Young ladies pronounced that they are operating, as you can see, the ancient Greek and Roman opening gymnastics, referring back to, again, that entertainment value. But notice there's very little till you get to the very bottom of it. You don't get much of a sense of what kind of ball players. They're not promoting any particular player, skill level, any of those kinds of things in much of this kind of advertising. New York Herald in 1893. So this is almost to the end of the century. We can still see they shocked both towns. A female baseball nine invades a very respectable corner of New Jersey, almost like an infection, right? And they're coming in. Bloomfield was indignant, but they played anyway. So they may be indignant, but they were still curious enough to want to. And the crowds at most of these games they talk about are generally pretty good. My favorite one is this other piece from 1875. Some mush-brained showman has organized a troupe of female baseball players, again, that vaudevillian, started them on a tour through the central part of Illinois. They're uniformed in jackets, pantaloons, and caps. Their names are called the Blondes and Brunettes. But here's the best part. The games ordinarily last about 5 innings, during which time they play about 3. So they're fooling around, obviously. And the score, 3,000 to 2,598. I exaggerated, obviously, to show how ridiculous they thought women's baseball was. And these kinds of things go on and on. These are just a couple of the examples that you see of the kind of thing that's out there. Here's another one. This is actually just after the turn of the century, Indianapolis. Female baseball is worse than female polo, I'll tell you, but they are infested with female baseball clubs. Again, that idea that it's a disease. It's a travesty on the national game, nothing but a cheap bid for shekels. And so you can see they're also bringing in the racist aspect and all kinds. But the female polo they're referring to was an attempt that they had previously where they tried to entertain people. It wasn't a polo match like we think of. It was women on roller skates, essentially playing almost like a field hockey kind of idea. And this was worse even than that, letting them play baseball. And so this kind of approach was very common. Broadening it out to look beyond some of those kinds of things, I wanted to sort of correct a misunderstanding that some people have out there. This is a broadside for the Dolly Varden character coming from a Charles Dickens play, very much used in the theater, represented by these ladies who are colorfully coiffed, as they say, used then in sports as well. And there are 2 Dolly Varden African-American teams of women playing in the 1880s, not the 1860s like most people say. Those 1860 teams that are usually identified were actually men's teams. The Dolly Vardens played in Philadelphia in 1883, and there were 2 Dolly Varden teams simply identified as the Dolly Varden 1s and the Dolly Varden 2s. 3 or 4 articles we found. One of them actually gave a roster of the players. And so we have some of their names. And one of the most prominent was a young lady by the name of Ella Harris, who was both the team's captain and pitcher. And we have a couple of short, very brief accounts of her appearing to have a pretty good handle on the rules of the game was what was focused on. But we unfortunately don't know a great deal about them, except that they played in and around and played men's teams in addition to playing amongst themselves and other women's teams. And so African-American participation, and this is just one example. There are other African-American women's teams out there as well that we're slowly beginning to learn a little bit about. This is a team from 1893 from Thief River Falls in Minnesota, and it illustrates something else about particularly the bloomer teams of the 1890s and onward, you'll notice that there are two men in the picture, and everybody sort of automatically assumes they must be the owner and maybe the promoter or something. They're actually players on the team. A lot of the bloomer team, not all of them, but many of them would often have two or more male players, sometimes referred to in the newspapers as toppers, if they dressed as women. That was a specific reference. They didn't have to, but some men did. And so they referred to them as toppers. Typically, they have two men on the team. One is the pitcher and one is the catcher. The assumption was that those were the two most important positions on the team, and women couldn't handle those, so you needed a man. And so we do have records of some professional ball players who go on later who got their start as toppers or as male players on a bloomer team. And so kind of an interesting start, but tells us again a little bit more about how people viewed baseball. And then, of course, in addition to the team play, there are individuals, and two in particular that are good to focus on. Lizzie Arlington is certainly one of those. Lizzie Arlington from Mahanoy City in Pennsylvania, well-known local athlete who became a pitcher recognized in the newspapers as early as 1891. That's our first reference that we see of her pitching in a game where her brother was the catcher, and that's how she got onto the team. The pitcher didn't show up, and her brother Harry said, "Hey, my sister can do this," and so they let her pitch. You'll see she's the famous lady pitcher, which is almost always how they advertised her, sometimes the world famous lady pitcher. But notice it says, truthfully advertised, honestly conducted, necessary to counter, right? And we start to see also the idea that this is okay to bring the ladies to see these games. This happens at the exact same time that a lot of baseball clubs are starting to have ladies' days in order to improve the atmosphere at games and prove that this was worthwhile so that you could bring the family to, that kind of thing. So you'll see that same. Arlington's real name is Elizabeth Stride. You'll also see her in the newspaper sometimes referred to as Elizabeth Stroud. There is another problem in trying to find people is the multiple names that were sometimes used. But Arlington becomes famous because in 1898, she pitched was signed on by the Atlantic League, so a professional men's league, first time this happens, to pitch in a game. And she pitches for the Reading team in the Atlantic League, one inning against the Reading Coal Heavers that she was pitching for. And she pitches in the ninth inning, gives up 2 hits, 2 walks, but no runs, and then doesn't appear again. So clearly she was not asked back. She continues to pitch because we see her name in 1901 and 1902 on bloomer rosters. So her name appears all throughout the late 1890s on different men's teams. I found her on a Norristown team, a team called the X-Rays, things like that, as a pitcher for exhibitions. So the first that we know of to receive a professional contract on a men's team. And then the other more famous is Maud Nelson. And there's a small movement afoot right now to try to make a case for Maud Nelson for the Hall of Fame. We'll see how that goes. But Maud became associated with a variety of bloomer girl teams. So you see here a broadside for her for the Western Bloomer Girls, for the Boston Bloomer Girls. She played on the Chicago Stars and the New York Bloomer Girls. She actually ends up being a manager and owns her own team and continues her career from the 1890s all the way through the 1920s. So a very long, extended career. Really, really interesting story. And if you want to read more about her, you should pick up the work by Barbara Gregorich, because she traces her story. She's not from this country and coming over, and so tracking down her real name was Clementine Breda. And so again, she's listed in newspapers under multiple names, not even Nelson. You get Nielsen, you get Olson, you get a whole, so tracking down these stories can be very difficult. But Nelson, as you can see here, we have her playing with the Chicago Stars, announcing themselves in 1901 as the champions of the world. And you'll notice the men in the lower part of the picture. So that's that example I was talking about. But notice as the players are identified, this was the article that went with it. They don't list the men on the roster. And you'll know, we know a little bit about 2 other players, Katie Becker who will continue to appear on almost every team Maud Nelson plays for, an infielder with some skill, but not identified in the papers the same way Nelson is. In most articles, Nelson, they'll talk about, well, the rest of the team not very good. They wouldn't win if it wasn't for Nelson. That Nelson is and she's their pitcher, that kind of thing. So good examples of a couple of the individual players who played during this time period. And so that gives you a little bit of an overview, and I was trying very hard to keep to time, and I think I did. These are some of the sources I was looking at, and you can see there's a whole variety of them out there in addition to the actual newspaper articles themselves. There's a whole lot more that you could say, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of a taste for what it is. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing my screen and certainly attempt to answer any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Oh, you are most welcome. My pleasure.
Does anyone have any questions for Leslie? If you do, just go ahead and raise your hand and we can unmute your microphone so you can ask your question. And I've got a long list of participants here, so I'm scrolling through and make sure I catch everybody. Jim Kimnack's doing the physical hand raising. Go ahead, Jim, and ask your question.
Yes. What's going on currently? I know there's a lady named Kat Williams who's involved in some kind of an international ladies baseball organization. What does that involve? What's involved in current movements for ladies playing regular baseball instead of softball?
Sure. Well, Kat Williams is a history professor like myself at Marshall University, and I'm actually on the board of that organization as well. It's the International Women's Baseball Center, and that group has been working to, the eventual goal is we're building a museum in Rockford, Illinois, right across the street and part of the grounds of Bayer Stadium, which is where the Rockford Peaches played in the 1940s and 50s. Obviously, the Rockford Peaches being one of the original teams. And there's still the box office gate is actually still there on the original one. And so that's going to become part of and so the goal of the organization is twofold or maybe threefold, but certainly to preserve the history, but also to promote. And currently there's a lot going on in women's baseball on all levels of pushing to not only for women to be able to play, but also to push for opportunities in front offices and umpiring. A lot of people don't know right now we have two women who are in the minor league system. Class A, Jenna Powell and Emma Charles-Will-Seiler, who got their start last year and are making the slow climb. And if you know how the umpiring system works, it's going to take a while and before they move up the ranks, but that's just the nature of the biggest thing I think that's happening right now in women's baseball is the support that has finally started to come, I should say, from Major League Baseball by sponsoring over the last few years some tournaments and training for girls up to the age of 12 and then from 12 to 18. And they've done that now for the last 4 or 5 years. And that is certainly in terms of publicity, a big boost and a necessary part of making people a little more aware of what's going on. And then I think the other big one was the Women's World Cup was played here in the United States for the first time in 2018 in Florida. And so I got a chance to go down and watch some of the teams from around the world that came to play. And it was, while the level of play and everything was really exciting and amazing, the sad part was how very, 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 very few people came to watch and be aware of. And so those are just a couple of the things that are happening in the current situation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And some of you may remember when we took a barnstorming trip around Indiana, Illinois, and into Iowa, we actually, and this was probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, we played at Byers Field in Rockford, and we played against a team that was recreating the original Rockford Peaches team.
The Starfires, yeah.
Yeah, as Leslie was talking, I was scrambling to try to find a photo I could share, but I wasn't able to get it in time. So maybe we'll post that on our Facebook page.
That's cool.
Yeah, Mr. Tootle, you have a question? Let me make sure we get your microphone working here.
Okay, am I on?
Yeah.
When you were talking about the 1875 team there, you mentioned that they reduced the field.
Yes.
I've often wondered about that as far as our women's team goes. If the games might go a little better if we weren't playing on a 90-foot base path field. So would that be historically accurate then if we wanted to cut the field down a little bit more to like softball size? Would that from
We-
your research, did the women's teams usually play on a little smaller field?
that's always an interesting question, and to say usual is the tough part. We
Yeah.
do know that it did happen. We do also know that they played on regulation size fields. So I think a team could make a choice, and either would be potentially historically accurate given the nature of, some have argued that the smaller field lended to the, it's not serious, it's not women playing, and so that the teams that really wanted to play the more serious game did play on the 90-foot base path. But we can't say that with 100% accuracy, because it's, unfortunately, that's one of the things that doesn't often make it into the newspaper articles, right? Is they literally, I mean, if you get a long article, you might get an article that's 3 or 4 paragraphs, and 3 of them are about their attire,
Yeah,
and then
right.
you get 1 paragraph that explains something about the game or the crowd. So what I would say is, either way, you could argue historically that you are doing something that's accurate.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know that we have the option if our women's team would want to do that. That they wouldn't be outside the bounds to do it and all that. So
Right.
very good. Yeah, that's something that's been on my mind for a while.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ryan, I think you had your hand up at some point. Ryan, you still there? Okay, let me make sure we get your microphone working. Okay, go ahead, Ryan.
I have a question about so 1860 the women did play, but when they started playing more kind of in front of people, were they upgrading their style play like the men were?
I'm sorry,
Like
I didn't.
pitching, was it different?
I
You didn't
only
hear me?
caught-
Sorry.
I only caught part of that. I'm sorry.
So did the women, when they played in 1860, did they upgrade the way they played as the men did as the years went on? Like with the pitching?
Yeah, they
They
tend to,
did.
what little bit we get on that kind of information, the teams that we would consider to be more serious, right? So not the burlesque style, because that's a whole different, and there's unfortunately way more of that reported. We do know that they did tend to try to follow the same kinds of rules and the same approaches in order to be taken seriously and in order to play, because most often they're playing other men's teams. They're not playing other women's teams. And so the necessity to play by the same rules becomes very apparent that is what they are doing. When you're talking,
Okay.
even the college teams tended to do that. It's the Sylvester Wilson type style of play that was not indicative of that.
So when did they actually? So they started wearing gloves at the same time men were wearing gloves.
It appears so. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I have one more. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
When you said they played shorter innings, were they doing that so they wouldn't get caught playing the game, or?
There's no real official explanation given most of the time for why they played. Usually what it appears when you look through the articles and sort of track what happens, they're exhibition games. And so exhibition games of any sort tended to often be 6 innings max, even if it was men playing men.
Okay.
So a lot of it and often it's because it's going on with something else. So there's a field day kind of thing, or there's a parade or something. So this is a part of a bigger activity. And so they cut it down to the usually 6 or 5 innings.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, Dr. Tootle, go ahead.
Hey, well, I just had another question about the earliest uniforms. As we talk about what our women's team right now, they play in like house dresses and all that.
Mhm.
But we have had uniforms in the past, and kind of interested in what the earliest examples. Like I had a little computer trouble, so I didn't get on. You had the Vassar College team up, that photo when I got
Right.
to log on. So maybe you said something about this that I missed. But in that picture, the women are wearing different dresses, but they all have the same cap and belt.
Correct. And that was
Right.
usually the case.
Yeah.
More often than not, they wore their own dresses. And then simply caps were the most common regular. And then when more so with the reds and the blues, that would be the belt that they would wear because that identified them as being on. So as opposed to putting a letter or something like that on their dress,
Yeah.
they would wear the belt and a cap. And that was fairly typical of most. So mostly because there wasn't money to be spent. And so the idea of spending money on and creating uniforms, things like that, just wasn't going to happen. And so the easiest way to identify them was cap and belt.
That's great. Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think, Brandy, you have a question?
No, I do, but Jim had his hand raised, so go
Oh,
ahead.
Jim already got to ask a question, so you go ahead.
That's okay. Well, Leslie, I just wanted to know what your drives your passion for researching this and teaching this. So where did that all start?
Well, I've been a fan of baseball for as long as I can remember, since I was a little kid. My dad, huge baseball fan, so watched. I actually have never been much of a player. That's not, and so where people find their passion that way, I find it on the opposite side, because I've always been interested in history as well. And for me, it's finding those stories that have not been told that need to be told, correcting information that's out there that's not, correcting myself when we learn new things. But I also think baseball in particular is such a huge part of American history. And when we tell one piece of the story, it's missing so much. It's almost a reflection of how we tend to tell history in general. We leave out people. And so in telling and broadening the story of baseball, we're broadening the story of American history for me. And so that's kind of, it's that kind of an approach. And I also, I mean, it's fun to tell people something they don't know.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, little kids are the best when they find out, especially little girls, oh my God, there are girls that play and I can do this. I mean, that's pretty cool to let them know that there's people out there and there's role models for them and those kinds of things. So.
Well, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few more questions, but before we get to those, Jennifer helped me track down the photo I was looking for. So here's the picture of when the Muffins were in Rockford.
Cool. Yeah, that's the gate I was talking about. Yep.
So yeah, we played the Peaches team there, and some of you may remember the woman in the middle standing next to Mark Skates. Did she run a triathlon that morning and then decided to come play us and was still the best player on the field?
Wow. Okay.
Okay, Amy, you had a question.
Hey, Leslie, this is Amy Dickerson. My question, and you kind of changed it up when you said you're not really a player, but if you were to go back in time and either game or to watch a game, I guess, where would you go and who would you see?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Well, if I was looking for women's baseball, going back into the night, I would definitely go. The New York State would be the place to go because there was more women's baseball being played. There was more baseball just in general being played there, and probably somewhere in the 1880s would be really cool to watch the very beginnings of the Bloomer Girl teams. But if I really had to pick one, Maud Nelson, I think, would be somebody I would love to go back and see how good she really was, because she's one of the few of the early female ball players who really gets decent coverage in the newspapers about her athletic ability and what she was able to do against men's teams and how respected she was for. So I'd love to actually see that in person.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie, I have a question I'd like to sneak in real quick, and then we'll circle back to you, Jim. But so it seems like a lot of what we hear about early women's baseball is either sort of community sponsored or sponsored through something at the university level. Are you familiar with anything that is organized by church groups or particular religions? I'm thinking specifically of something like muscular Christianity in the mid-19th century that would have promoted physical exercise as a way to spread the gospel. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh yeah. Well, muscular Christianity is a fascinating aspect of 19th century. But what's interesting about muscular Christianity typically is they didn't tend to promote that idea equally for both genders. It tended to be very much male-centered, very much, and so on the reverse side of things, what they tended to focus on was the morality side for women as opposed to the athletic side. And so you don't see a lot of that, unfortunately. I'm sure it probably happened on rare occasions in small towns, things like that, but it's not something that was widespread enough to find coverage in newspapers, things like that. Instead, they tended to sort of toe the more common line of muscularity for men, morality for women, and that's the role that women had to play.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Kimnack, you had a question?
Yes. We often hear, and you've pointed out, Vassar College is a place where women's baseball was played. Were there any Ohio colleges in the 1800s that you found reference to of playing baseball? Oberlin or any place else?
That's an interesting question. And, as you raise that, I'm just thinking, because Wellesley, Smith, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, and that's a little surprising, actually. And now you've raised an interesting question for me that I must go do some, maybe a bigger deep dive, because I would have, now that you say it, and I hadn't thought about it till you asked, I would expect that we'd find it at Oberlin.
Okay.
I mean, I just would be amazed if we wouldn't find it in their own records. And I'm gonna have to follow up on that, because that's a really intriguing question that I just haven't seen. But knowing what we know about Oberlin, I'd be amazed if there wasn't at Oberlin, of all places. And that'd be the primary one that I would think of in Ohio where you'd see it. I mean, but other than that, I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Ryan, did you have another question you'd like to ask?
The gentleman,
Okay.
David's had his hand up for quite a while. I've been watching him.
David, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, my wife and I went to the College of Worcester.
Okay.
And we had a article in our alumni newsletter recently, maybe in the last year or two, about a woman that played in the early 20th century named Alta Weiss.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she went on to get she went on to become a medical doctor.
Right.
Are there any other examples, a little bit similar to Jim's question, but he talked about teams, but were there any other individuals that were sort of, if you would say, were kind of some of the pioneers with the women's game in Ohio?
Well, you mentioned the premier one, and that's Alta Weiss. She is actually probably the most well-known Ohioan woman who played. And of course, she played here in the central. Her hometown is not too far from here. Really, really small town. That I went down there not too long ago to see what kinds of records they might have. Their historical society is inside their church and not open most of the time. So I haven't yet been able to catch the person who, because they have a variety of records. They have her uniform, things like that. But Alta Weiss played from the mid-19 teens to the 20s. Her father promoted her. Played mostly for men's teams up in the Cleveland area for exhibitions for entertaining the guests who came up in the summertime. And then, as was pointed out, she did go on to become a medical doctor and go back to take over her father's practice, and basically said she earned enough money from playing baseball to put herself through med school. In that respect, she's a lot like Amanda Clement, the first female umpire, 1905, 1910 timeframe, who also put herself through college with the money she earned umpiring baseball games.
All right, does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask Leslie before we take a break? All right, well, thank you so much, Leslie. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking. I
Today.
appreciate it. And I'm going to stay on and listen to the next presentation too.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so why don't we take a 5-minute break just to give everybody a chance to get a refreshment, and then we'll start promptly, let's say, well, I guess we can take a 6-minute break and we'll start promptly at 11. All right, it is promptly 11 o'clock. So we're going to get started again here. And then for the second half of this presentation, Amy's going to take over hosting. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to start talking about the diamonds and introduce our guest speaker, Brandy Frias.
Thanks, guys. I'm getting everything pulled up.
Mhm. Oh gosh. Oh.
All right, guys. So what we're going to transition into now is the history of the Ohio Village Diamonds. There's a picture of our team there. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Brandy Mama Bear Frias. So Brandy has been a diamond since 1999, so it was since the early inception of the diamonds. Brandy is our game day captain and keeps the ladies and the opposing team informed of all the rules. And to just get out there and have Brandy is also the daughter-in-law of the Diamond's co-founder, Diana Frias, and mother to our youngest playing diamond, Sophia Frias. Go ahead, Brandy.
Thanks. I look at my picture and I go, why am I always have this ugly face on my, yeah. So, yeah, thanks for guys for having me. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I figured out the PowerPoint on my son's laptop and then I said, well, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, a lot of what I'm going to talk about actually is, my mother-in-law gave me a lot of research. I mean, I knew a good bit of it, but I picked her brain about it. And she actually retired a few years ago to just spend more time at home with the grandkids. So, but yeah, a little bit, I'm going to just tell you a little backstory about how I got involved, and then I'll go into the history of it. But yeah, like Amy said, I started in '99. This cute guy that I am now married to introduced me to it, and happened to be he was part of the infamous Frias family, and said, hey, you want to come try to play baseball? And I'm thinking, I'm a sports girl, so yeah, so 99, and here I am, what's that, 21 years later, still playing the game. So I think I was pregnant through played all of my every year that I was pregnant, always played. Everybody was really scared, even when I was playing at 6, 7, 8 months or so. So, but I was a pretty diehard player. So, started out playing, like I said, this first picture, thanks Amy for doing this. Those were the uniforms that we wore in the beginning. When I started on, the talk was to start transitioning from those uniforms. And as Leslie and some of the other fellas said, is that they wanted to transition more into just a house attire, your farm dress. And so that's what we did. But but when I came on, I actually wore one of those blue uniforms, and the cotton was quite thick. It was hot. You'll hear a lot of us talk about it is hot, but you play because it's the love of the game and you love it, and you just sweat it out, and you do your best. What's nice about us is that when we're hot, we can take our apron or we can wipe our face off, where the guys don't really have that luxury. So but yeah, this is actually this picture. Well, I'll talk about the picture in a minute, but yeah, the diamonds actually weren't the diamonds. Technically started back in '93. Diana and Pam Coons, Dwayne Coons' wife, would come to the games to watch the Muffins and the junior Muffins, and they wanted to play. And so they started playing, and what they did is they just wore blue jeans and the Muffins shirts at the time. And so they wanted to do that. And then Pam and my mother-in-law said, hey, well, there's probably a women's team out there that we can start. We can reenact, we can do this. So they started doing a lot of the research, and Leslie, your research is really, really great. So, but found a lot of the same things that Leslie did. Obviously, Leslie's research is much more well in depth, but I do remember Diana telling me a lot of the main points of when it first started back then, as far as reenacting, recreating the Vassar College type of look. And so if you look at this picture, this was actually the first uniform that they did. But even before they became the Diamonds, they were actually called the Mollies because they hadn't thought of a name yet. And they wanted to be called something. And a lot of times as they started to grow, Diana has two sisters who played, and then just through friends, the team started to expand. And again, with that, Diana and Pam started doing a lot of research and trying to find just how they can start their own team of women alone. And so what they did then is during that time, they mostly played the junior Muffins, and then they would travel to festivals and play other cranks, such as we do today, where we'll play like a local 9. But that's what they did before other women's vintage teams were created around Ohio and such. So, but the uniforms, as you see here, came to be is that Pam and Diana met with the village costume coordinator and Dorothy Brandon, one of our lovely, lovely tenured families of the program, and they made these uniforms, and they were considered the exercise uniforms, going back to kind of model the Vassar team as far as going out to exercise. So they felt that this would be the most appropriate look. So they played in these uniforms for probably 94, probably 5 to 6 years, and then they started to phase out to where then you would start to see us wearing the skirts and the long sleeve white blouses. And so they did that for quite some time, and then the trend was as well. Then younger women, you would see them wearing the skirts and the white blouses, where the older women would wear dresses. So then you would want to transition, if you were getting older, into a dress versus a skirt and a shirt. And so on the team, some years, Amy, if you want to go to the a next picture. Yeah, because so you can see some of the people, they still were transitioning, like they still had some of them had the blue uniforms and some were transitioning. Now these are the Katydids. These are the Sycamore Katydids, and they formed a team here. So there was a conglomerate of them. But when I talk about the ages, at one point we had the ages of the youngest of 20. And then we had a lady by the name of Betty Needles. I remember her. She was 72. She played, and she didn't hit the ball very far. She trotted at first, but she loved to play the game. And so I just loved her soul about her. And she only played a few years, and she just was amazing. But she was out there because she just loved the game. So and of course, back then, as Leslie talked about, we were still trying to market the game. We were trying to tell people about the game. When I came on, it was still rather new. So one of the things that we have tried to do throughout the years is to portray and reenact the best that we can historically how the game was played. We weren't so much concerned about the score, but it was more about having fun. And that's one of the things that my mother-in-law has instilled in me, and she still does to this day with all 3 boys playing, is to have fun. And Amy can attest, and I think Susan's on here. If we don't laugh, we're not having a good time. And so we want to teach people about the game. I heard earlier in the presentation, when we go and talk to people, what's really neat is to see the smiles on the faces of the little girls, especially, to say, wow, that's really cool, and I want to try this, and so forth. So it's really neat. So so once once our team started to evolve, then let's see, so 93, a few years, and then it was then we were changed into the Ohio Village Lady Diamonds. They officially had a title. And so word started to get out that we were playing more festivals, and networking started to occur, and to which, let's see, so then you see here the Katydids. Amy, what's that next picture, if you don't mind? I forget. Oh yeah, so here's a picture of their uniforms of when they played. That was from my mother-in-law. Obviously, she dug out some old stuff there. So there's just another picture of that. And they were playing in Tiffin, which is Tiffin is a great place to play. So really nice festival there. So they had a good time there. But yeah, so other teams and started forming. So there were the Sycamore Katydids that I mentioned. There were the Cincinnati River Bells, the Canal Fulton Jennies. And those three, they didn't play for too many years. And then we had the Lady Clodbusters and the Lady Locks, which they played a little longer. Sadly, all of these teams have folded since then. The Lady Clodbusters were the last to fold, and just because the challenges of the women, of becoming mothers and busy lives and managing things, it can be tough. And so some women can battle it. I was the one that was bringing the pack and play to the field, where other women that wasn't the choice, and that was okay. That was okay. So it was really fun though to be able to play these teams. The Lady Locks, they wore all black skirts, and they wore white blouses and these beautiful hats, and they just were the most elegant ladies to play. And they played up in Akron, really, really pretty field at what's it called? Oh, what is it? Somebody help me. It starts with an S. You know what I'm talking about.
Dan Hewitt.
Yes, thank you. It's on the tip of my tongue. Stan Hewitt. Yeah, beautiful gardens, but very, very nice ladies. They played very elegantly, very, very eloquently. Not so much burlesque, I'll use that term, as Leslie was talking about, but it was just nice and flowed. And so it was really nice to play them. While the Lady Clodbusters, very, very nice team, they wanted to play, and they were very, very good ball players, good ball players. It was always a tough day to play them, and you had to bring your A game. We won many with them, but we also lost many to them. So they had a really, really, really fast girl. She's probably faster than most men. Her name was Melissa Wilson, and boy, she was fast, so you couldn't hit it to her. But so those were the teams in Ohio, but unfortunately they all folded just due to, like I said, lives and management of women being able they want to start families and so forth. So, and then there were two teams in New York that Diana was telling me about. They were called the New York Ladies 9, and then that was the one team, excuse me. And then the other team, and I remember going up and playing them. They were the Lady Hens of Rochester, Minnesota. So I remember making that long drive up there for that festival. That was a pretty good time. So, but other than that, our season has been for the past, so many years has been going to festivals, and we've played different places every year. We go down to Carroll. We've been doing that for the past so many years as kind of a tradition to play there's a local 9 there. We've always talked about them creating a team, because it's usually the same ladies that come back every year, but their commitment level is we just want to play, and it's the skirts. and that's a big thing. That's such a huge thing. And so when we talk about recruiting, and one of the things that I do is when I'm, talk to people about playing, I say, hey, do you like to play softball? I throw out the softball because women associate that more playing than baseball, and I say, oh, baseball. Oh, yeah. Oh, would you like to come out and try to play? And I have this really fun match, and it's real da-da-da. And oh, yeah. And then we wear a skirt. Whoa, no. So we typically, that's where they draw the line. And the Carol group is such one where they love to play. They'll put the skirt on for a game, and they'll have a good time, but that's pretty much where it stops. So, there was a team in Galleon that we played for a handful of years, real good group of ladies. And then a couple years ago, we played in Marysville. And what we try to do, I figure if we can just get one person from each time we play, if we could have them join, then we can continue to build our team. And so we actually did that a couple years ago in Marysville. We acquired a new player, and she's really dedicated. Her name is Amber. So she's more of a soccer player, I believe. And she'll tell you, so baseball's not really my thing, but I love to play the game. And she has such a great heart. So she's been playing for the past, I think 3 years or so. So, and I say, I rather have women that come out and like enjoy the game. You have to love the game. I think we've all Leslie talked about earlier, it's an appreciation of the game, to be able to show up, 1, and put a dress on, 2, and play the game with no gloves and learning the rules. So that takes dedication and heart. So for it, so I rather have a field of 9 women that have passion and dedication for the game versus someone that, ladies that are not going to be, and they're just showing up there and they want to destroy. I don't want to say destroy, but they're not there for the passion of it. So. And our joke on the inside joke, Amy, I'll share this with, we have a few of our diamonds on. Amy's our fastest on the team and probably the only fast person on our team. We have our inside joke is we have slow, slower, and slowest. So, but we're all dedicated, and I rather have that than a bunch of fast people who aren't dedicated. So, so yay, Amy, for being the fast one. So, let's see, I'm jumping around here. So yeah, to go back to one of the notes here is some people umpiring. Umpiring has always been interesting for us because way back when it started, Pam and Diana were the ones that umpired the games, and they would rotate. And then we finally got Robin. Those of you who remember Robin, we got him to umpire some of our games every now and again, and which was really great. And so we, I think Diana told him that he was going to have Rudy, Fearless Frias, umpire our games. And if you ever want a great theatrical but very good umpire, you'll want to have Rudy at one of your games. And so there's an article, Amy, if you go, I don't know if I included it. Can you go to the next? Is there another one, or is that all I have?
That's all.
Okay, so there's an article in there, and it might be this one. Sorry if there's a bunch of stuff, and I didn't want to include it because it was just notes and things, but where Rudy talks about you have to engage the crowd, you have to engage the cranks, because they're the ones that are coming out. And and he said it very well, he says, if you don't engage in them, you're going to lose them and they're going to go do something else. And so Rudy, oh my gosh, he would fine us for, maybe lifting our skirt up and trying to itch our leg or pull a sock up. Ma'am, 25% fine for showing it's like, oh my gosh. But it was engaging. It was fun. And people that, again, truly love the game liked to see us play for what it was, and to see that camaraderie. And yes, we were playing a game, but there was always that funness in it, or the best times are when, and every single woman, and if you haven't fallen, then you're truly not a ball player. But if you haven't fallen on your dress, you can't really be part of the team until you can do that. And so when that did occur, it was almost like it was an initiation, or like when you're in a sorority and you have to whatever they call it, I don't know the word, but you finally are part of it. So, but when you would fall, of course, your dress is up and the woman would come around and hide around you. And Rudy would he would really, really play it up. So it was really fun for him to be part of the team and the organization to help us out. And he would get on us about showing our bloomers and things and so forth. So that was a good time. So, and in that with talking about our bloomers, so as you progress, you can kind of see here in this picture here, can you go back to the screen before that, Amy? I'm going to make sure. So yeah, you can see here. And then on the first picture that Amy showed up as pictures, I was going to put a bunch of pictures up, but that's most of it is you're going to see examples on our Facebook page of what we wore. So you can see like this one, and then if you can go to that news, this is from 98, I believe. Yeah, because I think this is the year before. But yeah, this one, and then you can go to the 98. It says it right there. And then you can see, obviously, this is a more recent article. You can see where we've gotten away from the blue uniforms, or we're starting to wear the dresses. This is Margie right here with her back to us underneath the umbrella with the white shirt and the skirt. So that's what you're going to see more often. But and some of us. Some of us did it very, very simply, where we wore a uniform and then we would wear a petticoat underneath. Some of us wore the petticoat and the bloomers, and of course everybody wore long socks. So it was very, you didn't want to show any skin. That was kind of our, it was a, that was just, you just didn't do that back then. And so we even had to, have to get permission from the umpire. And as Amy says, I'm the game day captain. I'm always getting like asked, like, can you please ask? And I go, oh yeah, I'll ask. So I have to, go up in front of the cranks. Again, this is more for the show of it all. And Mr. Umpire, would you kindly ask the cranks if they would mind if we could roll our sleeves up on this hot day and so forth. So you have to be able to use the language and have fun with it. So of course, then whoever our umpire is for that day will, go and ask, would anybody be offended? And usually there's one guy in the crowd that has some funny remark to say, but we have a good time with that. So, so we've been playing, so 93, we've been playing a long time, and sadly, it has become where we are playing more at festivals and in the local 9 and things. I was chuckling with the questions as far as making it a smaller field, and I wanted to go, sometimes it's nice because you're running 90 feet in those dresses and it's hot out. It would be nice to shorten them, but I think, personally for me in speaking, I think it would not really portray. I think I like the 90-foot bases. I like that we can spread out on the field. I think if you were to shorten the field up for us, it would be nice for us for running, but I think it would change the game. I really think it would. And so I think that's all I really had. Am I missing anything? Is where we're at, and if you want to add anything, Amy, or.
Thanks, Brandy. I will tell you, I'm getting slower in my older age now, but I appreciate the shout out.
Well, you're still faster than most. So. Good, so.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So, Aaron, I'll turn it to you guys for the question portion.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. And thank you so much, Brandy.
Sure.
And we already have a question in the queue. Tom, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes. Brandy, you've been lucky to play with your mother-in-law and your daughter both, but I just wondered if you had a favorite memory or event that you played at, or something that you remember.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. It's like, what could I share? What could I? There are so many that I really could share. I don't know. I really liked traveling to Minnesota years ago, and I think just because of the game and going up and meeting different people. I know probably many on here have done. We talked about the barnstorming tours and things, but just being able to meet different people in different states. It's nice to be part of you know, we hear a lot about New York and baseball and vintage, and Leslie did a great job talking about that. It's nice to be part of a state, though, that women's vintage baseball we've kind of birthed it in a sense, where it's grown. We've had many teams. So when we can go out of state and talk to other women about it, that's been kind of a really thing to do. So, you know, there's so many things like plays I could think about, or, you know, I remember when I was running from third to home and I fell, and I think I was 6 months pregnant, and like the crowd stopped and I said, I'm fine, and I made it home. I mean, those types of things. But no, I really it's just the memories of just being, meeting new people and talking to the crowd and things. So, yeah.
What was it like playing with your mother-in-law?
Oh gosh. So Diana, boy, she's I loved razzing her because she was such a great ball player. She was very humble. And you know, she and Pam, I didn't play, I played maybe 1 year with Pam, I think. And I think she said, okay, I'm retiring. But Diana, you know, she ended up retiring like 5 years ago or so now, maybe even more. She's, you know, being one of the founders of the team and being it for so long, I just really appreciate how she set the tone. And I kind of going back to when I said earlier, as far as she said, if you're not laughing and you're not having fun, then there's nothing, it's not worth it. You know, we're here to reenact the game. We're here to play it. And she would actually get mad if people got too intense. She did. She would get upset and go, ladies, you know, it's not a big deal. Let's have a good time. And she did a really good job of setting the tone. And she's the one who introduced me to the pitching position and that. So it was until she transitioned out. So made me the pitcher I am today. So.
Well, thanks for preaching the gospel of vintage women's baseball with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't have as much probably as Leslie, which that's good. I really liked hearing Leslie and what she had to say. So, but I hope I gave a good portrayal of what has happened throughout the years. And so, and what's been going on. So it's been nice to meet a lot of women and women have come and gone. I can say that, but we've had a really good core of dedicated women that have been part of it. And Jackie, she started 2 years prior to me playing, and so I know she's still part of it. And then Margie Peterson started the same year I did. That's what I wanted to mention. What's really unique, I think, about our team is we have so many people that are still part of the program, want to be involved in it, but necessarily don't even live in state. So Margie lives in Pennsylvania, and we have a Sunshine, as her nickname is, Marcia. She lives down in the Carolinas, but she still loves to be part of it. We have Susan, who's on here. I think, is she on here? Yeah, she's on here. Is Valentine on there? We recruited her from one of the Michigan teams, and so she wanted to join us because the Michigan teams were, I don't want to say folding, but they were having a hard time getting ladies to play. And so we said, hey, come play with us. So Susan, dedicated, moved from Michigan, and now she's down in Virginia. And she actually drove up from Virginia to come to our first seminar. So that's really dedication. And so I really, and she's such a great woman. So we have, women just spread all out, and we're not all centralized, which I think that again goes, I rather have a group of women that are dedicated and passionate about the game. So yeah.
Leslie, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. That was really interesting to hear. I appreciated hearing the sort of development over the years and where it's gone. But I'm a little curious just about where it is today and the number of teams that because you mentioned that now it's more tournaments that and not so much. So are there many other? Because I over the years, I mean, I lived in Toledo for a while, and so the Toledo had a team, and I knew that others, and I've seen those all sort of disappear. So I didn't know where things are at for you guys today.
Well, we have, there's us, and then Amy, I'd love for you to talk more, because Amy's is kind of spearheading this with the Eastwood Gems from Ohio. And then, so if you want to talk about them, and then there are teams in Michigan, a couple on them, but they're running into the same thing as far as lives and becoming mothers and I'll admit it today, but only today, women are hormonal. And sometimes hormones cause women to clash, and there's conflicts in personalities, which can cause women to leave the program. So that too might have been play into a Michigan team or two. So not, and I'm not here to put that as a foundation of that's why, but that's just, sure. We're just, women being like, oh, I'm not going to do this. So anyhow, but Amy, do you want to talk about the Gems and what's been going on?
Yes, thanks. So this is part of an effort that we're trying to track down if there are other women's teams across the U.S. right now. So to my research, there are currently about 6 teams across the U.S. There is the Chelsea Marys out of Chelsea, Michigan. There's they call themselves Little Phillies out of Western Michigan. There's the new forming team, the Eastwood Gems. I believe we have some ladies on today that are part of that team. They were slated to, however, we have been unable to play them due to the pandemic. So hopefully that continues to build in their team there. Some other teams that might not be well known are, you had mentioned the Rochester teams out of Olmsted County, the Hens and the Chicks. They play out of the History Center in Rochester. And then we have the Genesee Country Eye Village and Museum in Mumford, New York, which is just right outside of Rochester. They have 2 women's teams, in addition to 5 men's teams, apparently, where they call themselves the Bells and the Porters. One thing we're running up against, though, is that many teams do not travel at all. So the Diamonds obviously are willing to travel. We have traveled to Chelsea to play them. And then, with the newly formed team of the Gems, we would obviously travel to them. They're out of Dayton, Eastwood, Ohio. But otherwise, the other teams, they pretty much play at their local, venue, and are not willing to travel to Ohio. So that's where we're at today.
Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah, Dr. Tootle. Oh, hang on a second.
I'm going to started. That was a great thing. I'd just like to mention Doug Smith's role in that. He was the team manager at that time and was a paid staff member of OHS and did all the things that Aaron and Jim Kimnack have been doing, scheduling games and other members of our board, getting the uniforms and, all the things about running the program, along with the things that Susan does as far as integrating the baseball program with other events going on in the village and all that. So that was all under his watch. And the great work that Diana and Pam did, that was with Doug, and he was right there as a great supporter of this, innovator, 100% in favor of starting the women's team. And so he hasn't been around for a while, so some of you that have come along in the last 8 or 10 years maybe haven't met him or don't know much about him, but I just want to make sure that his name got mentioned there as one of the pioneer, founder, whatever you want to call it. He just did a great job on that. And you and Jackie and now Amy and the others that have taken the leadership in that has just been great. And we're all behind you, and we want all this to work. And it's neat that it did start way back there and 25 years plus now. So keep up the good work, and that's great. Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Yeah, thank you for mentioning Doug. You're right. I wrote that in my notes. I was trying to stay on point. So yes, you're right. Doug was a great guy. So he did a great job with that.
Just a quick Amy, I may not have heard it, and so I was going to ask, did you mention among the teams that you were talking about the Detroit River Bells?
The Detroit River Bells is a team that we have played in the past. However, it is our understanding that they have.
Amy, you're cutting in and out on us, so you'll have to repeat that.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear Amy. Yeah, that's true. That there were the Detroit River Bells, but they were one of the ones that they are no longer disbanded in the recent years. So it was just recruiting and finding numbers. So
Okay.
and they had more of the look. The River Bells had more of the look of the blue uniforms, the
Right.
exercise uniforms and things. So.
Yeah, I know Carol Sheldon very well from that team.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought they were still, as of last year, I thought they were still playing. So that's why I was curious.
And it may be something where they were playing and they had it other people, but actively, I was not aware that they
Okay.
were. And Amy could say more to it if she knew. So.
And I believe was Yvette Jacobson once affiliated with the River Bells?
Yes. Yeah, she was the captain. Yeah, Scrappy.
Okay, yeah, so she's currently a trustee for the Vintage Baseball Association.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in and say something real quick. We're talking about some of the people that have kept the program going, and Brandy has given us such a good history. And we've spent a lot of time this season talking about the Muffins and how this is our 40th consecutive year playing vintage baseball. But I also want to reemphasize that this is the 27th consecutive year for the Diamonds playing ladies vintage baseball. So we've been talking about a lot of these teams and some of the struggles they have to keep going. So Brandy, do you have any idea what has enabled the Diamonds to continue to play for 27 consecutive years when so many other teams have come and gone in the interim?
That's a good question. I would probably say to that, we have the, I don't want to say that. I think it goes back to where we have core people that are highly invested in baseball, highly invested in the program, and are passionate. I just think it goes back to the passion and dedication. A lot of our core, when I say core, a lot of our core people that are involved, such as myself, where we have our significant others also play, or they might be a crank, or they like baseball in general, maybe their spouses don't play. And so it's just that dedication and to come together every year. And I think our camaraderie, we have such a great group of ladies that we don't, there's no bickering. I joke about the hormonal kind of thing, but there's no bickering, there's no arguing. And we have a lot of fun. We like to laugh. We like to joke with one another. The Amy and Susan can say I'm the one that'll dish it out the most, but I'll take it the most. So I have to, as the captain, I'm repeating myself, but I've learned a lot from Diana in the sense of you have to keep the game light, you have to keep the game fun, because that's what attracts people to it. And so with that, I think it's just those core people that we have been dedicated because we've built our foundation on, hey, this is a great program. We have great ladies part of it. And so we attract that type of person that's going to come in and be dedicated. And again, we're going to have women that have come in and out and are in for a few years, or they just come and play for one game. But we've just had a really, really good group of dedicated women based on that foundation that Diana has started. And I just think that's a really sweet thing. So Amy, do you have any thing you want to add about, why you came on and why you continue, other than the love of the game, but what draws you into it and why you keep coming back?
So I can add, like Brandy, I have now 2 children. I also played the day of my wedding rehearsal. So it is very much a family-oriented, lifting each other type feel for our team. And that's what I think I appreciate, and just being able to see the friends on the team.
Good point. Yeah, it is. And we do. We raise our kids. We bring our pack and plays, and we hold on, watch my little one while I go hit, or put everybody. We bring the 2 pop-up tents, and we all cram under there. We're a pretty tight group of ladies, and so I think that's what helps us stay together. So yeah, we may live our separate lives off the field, but we can come together and we can play like it's just been like another day. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting that so many other ladies teams are unwilling to travel or unwilling to make the kind of concessions you might need to make to play the game properly and represent it properly. And so it's pretty remarkable that the Diamonds have continued to do that for such an extended period.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've had, again, the foundation that was laid, the expectations in that we're very open, very upfront, this is what the game is, this is what you like. And I think that's either women stay or they don't stay. And we have the women that stay, but we also have a great, I give a lot of credit to OHC, and we have a great backing, we have a great foundation that supports us through and through. And so we feel like we're a part of something. We feel like we're making a difference. I think that also is a big thing, is if you're trying to run something on your own, or even a program under something smaller, I don't exactly know what the other teams are running under, but I think we have a great historical organization as a whole that supports us. And I think it helps too that we're paired with another vintage team. And so some of the other ladies may or may not be, the gems are with them. So it helps them grow. So we can do those back-to-back games and continue to show people what we're doing. And I think that too is a part of why we've been in it for so long. So.
Great, thank you. Ryan, you have a question. Oh, make sure you unmute your microphone.
My bad.
Where's
so I
Megan?
really have a, huh?
Where's Megan?
She's not here. She's at work.
Okay. Well, I know she's not there still. That's why. I wondered. Okay.
My dog Wigget's here. Sorry. So I don't really have a question. I had to say, the first year they had the Franken move. Brandy, you probably remember this. Amy, remember this. We went there. I was playing with Black Stockings, but I had a chance to hang out with you guys, or you ladies, and it was so fun. It was so fun, and I actually think I got a chance to umpire or I caught for you guys. I was a catcher. Remember? So got to get in and catch, and I was goofing around, and you guys are having a good time with me, and that was really fun. I really enjoy that, and I got to see how you guys really enjoy the game, really enjoy being around each other, and it was an honor to be a part of that. And I also wanted to throw out there that me and Amy went to Pioneer Village for the help during a Halloween some festival thing they wanted to throw in October, and we got to meet some of the gyms. And from where I gathered from that, they were really interested and really loved the game, and they were really enjoying that they had the opportunity to have an opportunity to try to play this game. And I think that they are going to be a real great inclusion to the game for the ladies. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
That's great. Yeah, I think it'll be fun to have. I'm really excited. It stinks that we can't. Amy said we were supposed to play them, but there's that balance of I want to be able to play teams that are competitive in a sense, but also enjoy the game. So there's always that balance. And I've actually given feedback before where we've been to some festivals, and they bring in their nine toughest players and they just beat up on us. And yeah, while nobody likes to lose, it's more so it's not fun. And it's not a real portrayal, and we're out there and so I've said, yeah, I don't know if we want to go back to that, or because we're out there to portray the game, to have a good time. We're tenured in knowing the balance of playing the game, being competitive, but also reenacting, where the ladies, understanding their perspective and coming in to where, they're out there to play and they're out there to win. And so sometimes it's not very fun, to be quite honest. So I'm glad that hopefully, we'll get, competition and things and can have a good time. So yeah, I appreciate you playing. And yeah, I was going to say, we've had many years where we've had some of our gentlemen, some of my brothers-in-laws have maybe put on a skirt or two and have played behind for us, or have caught or had to bat the opposite way or did something. And so we've had that many years. Actually, one of the articles that I had in there, it's really small, fine print. Eric, as you all know, the Frias boys have, I make a joke about when I started dating Ian, he was looking for me. And so when we started dating, people would come up to me when I started to become more of the, oh, hey, Rudy, hey. So, hey, sorry, this song get on. So when we started dating, and I got to more settling into the vintage family things, and it was like, oh, you're dating a Frias. And I'm going, yeah, I'm dating, those Frias boys, watch out. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, they would, as Rudy's nodding his head, but, they would put on a skirt and hit and play and stuff. And so it just, just became part of the family and whatnot. But they were, so the article, sorry, it got off track there, but the article talked about how when Eric was little, they wanted Eric to hit from the right side or something like that. If the article, if I can remember what the article said, because the ladies wanted to see his better side. And so they had him, it was just hilarious. So to be one of the Frias boys and whatnot, so they were put up on pedestals for, more than just their looks, I should say. So, but yeah.
Rudy, since you were name dropped, do you want to go ahead and respond to your time playing with the Diamonds?
Yes, I would. Yeah, some of my fondest memories are playing with the Diamonds, especially as a junior Muffin. The Diamonds were a club that we played on a pretty consistent basis, and so it was. We were never forced to do it. My mom was never like, "You're playing," and it was just like, "Do you need help, Mom?" Sure, absolutely. So it was always just a given and understood. So
yeah.
And Tom, I have great legs, okay? So you're missing out.
Yeah, Rudy, I was telling everybody how your mom was, she set such a great foundation for the program and why we've become this long. I said, your mom she would get mad if we weren't having fun and laughing. She would, it was almost like it was, yeah, she just, if you weren't having fun and you weren't laughing, it wasn't a good thing. So and I just keep attesting to, that's what I learned about and why we have a good time now today. And so that's, she really, and Pam too. I mean, there's the starters, but she was with it the longest, more than Pam. So she was really attest to a lot what she did to what we are today. So.
Is this the question portion of the program?
Yes.
Yes, you have a question.
I'm going to ask a question. If it's already been asked or, because I'm late to the party, but huge fan, first time, long time. My question for Brandy would be, what was recruitment like? Like, how has recruitment evolved over the years for the Diamonds?
Oh, that has not been asked. But I kind of touched on it. It can be challenging because I talked about how where women, I'll recruit them as such, like, hey, do you want to come play baseball? Do you want to come play softball? And now I won't start with the dress thing. I never, ever start with the dress thing. And of course it's like, yeah, I love the game and da-da-da. So let me tell you more about the game. And I get into it. We play 90-foot bases and no gloves. Really? No gloves? That's kind of cool. And yeah, we use wooden bats and da-da-da. And then I insert, and we wear skirts or dresses. And they go, whoa. So either they're on board or they're not on board. So, recruitment, you would think that there would be a lot more women that would want to play. But I've talked about, I think it's just various things that they have families and lives and things, and that motherly instinct of, well, I can't, who's going to watch my kids, or I have to work or traveling or whatnot. So it's always been a challenge. So to find people. And my thought is if we can find at least one person at every time that we travel to a festival or something that would be interested in coming on, then that will continue to build our program. So.
All right, does anyone have a final question for Brandy?
Oh, it's Sophia. Come here, Sophia, real quick. Well, they're asking final questions. Come over here and say hi, everybody. And our youngest Diamond, which has actually been a delight for her to play. Say hi.
Hi.
So, yeah, she's our youngest Diamond. Normally we like our players to be a little older, just for the safety factor. But she's been around the game for, well, since you were born. So we sometimes will make a internal suggestion and internal, what's the word? Not suggestion, decision for you you get to scoot by that. So yeah. And what's your nickname?
I'm not telling that.
Her nickname is Squawks. So, and if you ever see her, she can tell you why she earned that nickname. So.
Yes, I will.
So, Brandy, you're on mute.
There we go.
Hey,
I'm sorry. Sorry.
So
Go ahead.
I have a funny story. All right. It's kind of a scary story because I really don't want Ian running at me.
He's not
but-
here. It's
So we were playing at the all clubs match the night before the Ohio Cup, and Sophia is on second base, and I'm batting. I'm getting ready to hit one, and Ian is on first base, and he yells at me. He's like, "Don't kill it! Don't hit my daughter!" And I'm like, "Oh no!" So I was like, I better do what he says. So then I hit a hard one to right field, and then I turned and I got on first, and he came around and got all the way to third, and Sophia scored. And he's like, "Is that all right?" He's like, "It better been all right." So I just thought that was a very funny story because I did that with Sophia's first game she played was during that all clubs match, and then I think the next year we went to Frankenmuth as she played.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. He's a protective papa, so he's all talk though. Really, he's all talk. So yeah, people think he's big and scary. But where's Craig's on here? Craig will tell you he's all talk. So.
All right, well, thank you so much, Brandy, and thank you again, Leslie. I'm going to.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Try to do one final screen share, and everybody should be able to unmute their microphones at this point. And I think we should give one hearty huzzah to our guest speakers for today. So if you could all unmute your microphones, and I'll lead you in one hearty huzzah. So hip hip.
Huzzah!
Virtual huzzahs. All right, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good day, and we're going to try to get this recording up on the OHC website. So if you want to ever go back and take another look at it. Hopefully we'll get that going if I don't mess up the conversion of the recording in the process. So have a good day, and I hope to see you all out on the baseball field soon. Take it easy,
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.